I'm Asuma Kataoka and you are watching NewsX World. The US President Donald Trump declared that Israel and Iran have reached a complete and total ceasefire agreement, effectively ending what he called the 12-day war. However, Iran has completely refuted the claims made by the US President Donald Trump and said that no agreement on ceasefire has been reached. Asian shares gained and oil prices were down today as fears of an energy market shock eased following Trump's announcement. In a Truth Social post, Trump said, "Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire." According to Trump, the ceasefire will begin in approximately 6 hours. After both countries complete their final missions, Iran will initiate the ceasefire and Israel will follow 12 hours later. The war will be officially considered over after 24 hours. Trump declared a ceasefire minutes after each side threatened new attacks. Iran launched missile attacks on US military bases in Qatar and Iraq. It was confirmed by the US president that Iran had launched 14 missiles following what he called the obliteration of Iranian nuclear facilities by the US and its allies. Following this, the Iranian foreign minister posted on X that the military operations of Iranian armed forces to punish Israel for its aggression continued until the very last minute. At 4 a.m., while saying that if Israel stops its illegal aggression against Iranians no later than 4 a.m. Tehran time, they have no intention to continue our response afterwards. Now we have guests joining us for this discussion. Scott Faulkner, he's head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm based in Washington. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Trump declares a total ceasefire, but Iran denies any agreement. What does this say about U.S. credibility in brokering Middle East deals? And is this a justified ceasefire if only one party has agreed on a ceasefire?
It's all very confusing because there's no documents yet. And as you rightly said, there's announcements from the White House. There's no announcements from the Prime Minister of Israel. There's an announcement from Iran that says that they've not seen anything and have not agreed to anything. So it's very confusing at the moment. I think that the first reality check is going to be whether any additional missiles are being fired by anybody at anybody. If that war front between Iran and Israel goes quiet, then clearly something has moved forward in terms of a ceasefire, but formalizing it, what parameters are, what happens next, all that stuff is still seems to be speculation, except for the posts from the President of the United States. It's very, very confusing at the moment.
And now, how do you interpret this idea of final missions before a ceasefire? Is this just war continued by other means?
It's possible. I mean, I think what's probably the most telling thing in the last 24 hours is that when Iran sent its missiles toward Qatar, they announced it in advance. They allowed the base to be evacuated. All of the missiles were either intercepted. I think one went off course and plunged into the Persian Gulf. So it was more like a symbolic act for Iran to save face. And so having Iran communicate, at least with Qatar, that we were going to do this, it was sort of more symbolic than a real extension of the war. So there's just a lot of interesting things that have been happening, and whether that was their signal to say enough is enough, really it's all speculation until we see documents and until we see a true cessation of activities between certainly Israel and Iran. It looks like the U.S., just their one bombing run is all they've done so far.
And if Iran's response is truly over, is their foreign minister claims, and what happens if Israel responds anyway, like it did with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that they have a cease agreement since November last year, but the attacks still continued. And what happens next in the next maybe 24 to 48 hours, according to you?
Right. Well, this is going to be interesting because the whole point of this is Iran going to continue to be a threat to the region? How many more ballistic missiles do they have? How many more missile launchers do they have? Are they going to continue to support their three client terrorist organizations, Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah? Are they going to continue to say death to Israel, death to America? Are they still going to be training young people to kill Jews? I mean, there's just so many different pieces to this that just simply not firing rockets at each other for a short period of time does not necessarily resolve the entire matter in the region. So the next 24 hours will certainly be telling in terms of, does anyone shoot at anybody? And if not, then what type of discussions occur to de-escalate and create peace in the region? But again, what kind of peace? Because we have three active terrorist organizations funded, supplied, and trained by Iran. Is Iran going to give all that stuff up? I mean, this is really still in the formative stages.
And according to you, do people in U.S. see the UN and Europe as neutral actors or as siding with the West in this conflict, with Germany just calling for de-escalation today?
Yes, I mean, well, again, is Iran going to give up its agenda to destroy Israel? Are they going to give up funding terrorism? Are they going to give up asserting their influence in that region? Are they going to give up a nuclear program? I mean, all these questions have not been resolved yet. So unless all those questions are resolved, even as a cessation of the current what Trump's calling a 12-day war, does not necessarily mean there won't be more war later.
Scott, you will stay with us. We have a breaking news. Israeli military has said that fourth wave of missiles launched from Iran towards Israel as we speak. Now we go back to this discussion with Scott. Scott, thank you for staying with us. What is your take on this? Will there be a halt in ceasefire talks now that there were fresh attacks by Iran again?
Again, it's in this case, since Iran, again, the firing on Qatar was symbolic. If the firing on Israel is probably a continuation of the war. So again, we'll have to see if Israel's going to be able to intercept all of these ballistic missiles. Are there going to be some that fall into Haifa and other civilian locations? Are there going to be casualties? I mean, this whole thing could still be moving forward as a true war between Israel and Iran. And then again, what's the role of America and all that? And so, you know, press releases are one thing, reality is another. And right now it looks like there's two different realities, the press releases and the war itself. And
also Germany calls Iran's strikes calibrated but unacceptable. Is this a mixed signal from key EU player?
Again, I think that there's a lot of people who I would have to say are naive, that think that somehow Iran's going to give up everything that its 1979 revolution is all about. I just don't see that happening. So even if this last round of ballistic missiles that you just referenced, if that's the last round and things go quiet, again, there's just so many parts of the Iranian agenda in that region that unless some of those other issues are resolved, unless Iran actually says we're no longer going to do all of these horrible things to all of these people in the future, this is maybe just simply a way for Iran to try to kind of catch a breath, rearm, resupply, reposition. And again, we're back to the other issue, which was talked about earlier today. Now, did Iran move any of its nuclear material or its equipment either to other locations or even out of the country before the B-2 strikes? There's still a lot of questions that have not been resolved. And unless they get resolved, we are not going to have peace in that region.
And like an hour ago, we found out that Israel has asked their citizens that now they can move out of the shelters or bunkers. So does the fact that Israel has told this to their citizens does that mean the military threat is over, and also now that Qatar's airspace is also open? So what is your take on that?
There's clearly moving parts, and is there a truce and cessation? I mean, in Israel, people go about their normal business. People go to the beaches. People go about shopping with just simply an eye toward the sky and an eye and their alerts on their mobile phones. So moving out of the shelters right now has been sort of standard procedure for the last 12 days. So it doesn't necessarily indicate any change.
And going back to Germany's stance, do you think Germany or other European states could act as bridge now? And can they do something about this situation still, also Germany and the EU?
Only if they are willing to do a very aggressive and comprehensive monitoring of Iranian activities. To just simply say, everything's fine, let's have a signing ceremony and go back to normal. Normal is Iran helping terrorists. Normal is Iran pursuing a nuclear program, a weapons program, not a electrical power grid program. So unless Iran really does say we're going to change, which means all of these people who've committed themselves heart and soul and their fanaticism to the revolution going back to 1979, they're going to magically overnight say, we're not going to do this anymore, which I just don't see happening. This could be just a ruse. And I'm glad that Europe is concerned. I'm glad that they want to be at the table and try to make things better. But unless there is heavy changes, strategic, fundamental changes in the way Iran views the world and the region, or there's heavy duty monitoring that is allowed everywhere in Iran, this could all just simply be another one of those moments where naive people think everything's wonderful, but reality is going to crash in and kill more people.
Scott, I would like to push on the point that some people are still naive, yes, and maybe in US people still don't know the reality in the Middle East, that Qatar, somewhere which hasn't seen a situation like this in decades. People were panicking in the mall from what we saw from visuals yesterday. How do you interpret the local media in US? How serious are they taking this situation, and people in the media, are they presenting things accurately about the situation in Qatar and with Iran as well as Israel?
Well, again, a lot of I like to say America is probably the most parochial world power in world history. Most Americans don't really focus outside of our borders. Geography is no longer taught in our schools. I would think that if someone had a unmarked world map, most people couldn't find the Middle East, let alone the individual countries you're referencing. So it's there's not that many people in America truly engaged in what's happening over in the Middle East, let alone having any real sense of Shia versus Sunni, Iran versus Iraq war, all the different puzzle parts that go on, the role that Qatar and the other Persian Gulf states play in the region, both in terms of intermediaries with Hamas, intermediaries with Hezbollah, intermediaries with Iran, and the huge American presence. I mean, as you well know, just less than a month ago, Trump was actually at the base that was supposed to have been attacked today. So there's just it's a very complex region with a very complex history, and not that many people really understand it, and that's part of the problem as well.
Thank you very much, Scott Faulkner, for joining us. Now we have a breaking news. An Iranian ballistic missile struck an apartment building in Beersheba, killing 3 people and injuring several others, according to the Israel Fire and Rescue Center. Israeli Emergency Service MDA has also confirmed the death toll. This is the first reported death in Israel since Trump announced ceasefire. Now we are joined by guest Irina Zuckerman. She's senior journalist live from New York. Irina, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What is your take on the ceasefire situation, since Iran has also attacked and Israel has also maybe Israel will attack, we don't know that yet, but Iran has definitely attacked. What's the situation like? What are we expecting in the next 24 hours, according to you?
Question. First of all, the ceasefire was supposed to start 6 hours from the time of the announcement, but apparently came as a surprise, particularly to Israel, which was not consulted about the arrangements, and particularly after Iran had already sent a ballistic missile that seemed that gave room and time for continued hostilities. Now it seems that the ceasefire, which was not conclusively agreed on, was violated. Iran appeared to accept the ceasefire, but that statement was articulated only by a spokesman, not by anyone from the senior leadership. So it's not clear whether Iran ever fully committed. As of now, it does not seem to be an active ceasefire, and it seems likely that Israel will retaliate, particularly if there's an expectation of continued attacks on civilian targets. This is a very different situation from the retaliatory attacks on U.S. bases in Qatar, which were coordinated, prearranged, where the base was fully evacuated and where no one was hurt. This is a very different situation where there was a deadly incident.
Irina, I would like to press you on the fact that Trump already announced, regardless of what Israel officials confirmed or Iranian officials confirmed, why would President Trump announce a ceasefire if Iran had not agreed fully? Was this a tactical move to shape the narrative, according to you?
Trump was definitely trying to pressure both parties to come to a conclusion, because as far as Trump is concerned, the objectives of the escalation were met. U.S. had carried out its threat to use military force if Trump did not come to the negotiation table within 60 days from his initial announcement, which is exactly what happened. Israel carried out very significant attacks on various military targets in Iran and decapitated a lot of the military leadership. Also, Trump believes, rightly or wrongly, that the nuclear program by Iran has been completely destroyed. That is quite in question by many analysts, and those questions are only growing. But Trump believes that the matter is finished, and so he's acting as if it is, regardless of the intent of the other parties in the conflict.
According to you, could this disputed ceasefire statement actually derail or have any effect in the current situation?
Well, because it did not appear to be coordinated with either of the parties, it seems very doubtful that it would go exactly as planned, particularly since there was no clear high-level commitment from any party. Israel's reaction was to say that this announcement came to them as a shock, which is not the same as agreeing to its terms, particularly if Iran continued to attack. Israel had previously stated that they reserved the right to retaliate and to defend themselves from any acts of aggression.
And how do you interpret the earlier news from US that after the final missions are completed, what do you think they were indicating towards when they said final missions before a ceasefire? Is this just war continued by other means, according to you?
From what I understand, US has been assisting Israel with cyber attacks inside Iran, which also could contribute to the damage of the military or nuclear infrastructure, in addition to the physical airstrikes. So as far as the US is concerned, the major targets have already been penetrated, and some of these objectives were achieved. However, what US considers mission accomplished is not necessarily the way Israel looks at it. It is true that many military sites have been destroyed, and many military leaders and political actors have been taken out. However, given the fact that Iran has continued to successfully barrage Israel with missiles and drones for the past 2 weeks, it seems that not everything has been destroyed. Clearly, Iran still has a sufficient arsenal of weapons to attack Israel, and the launch sites have not all been identified and disabled. So as far as Israel is concerned, they probably view it as necessary to ensure that Iran is in no position to continue attacks on civilians.
And how is this situation being framed by your local US media?
The media is as surprised as anybody by Trump's statement, given that there was absolutely no discussion of that matter. It was expected that Israel would probably bring the matter to a close within a couple of weeks from the beginning, based on the strategic objectives and based on the effectiveness of the operation. However, given that Iran had continued to attack Israel this entire time, and there has been no commitment from Iran to put an end to those attacks, it was doubtful that it would end as soon as was initially considered. There was some expectation that Iran would at some point return to the table humbled by the success of the military operation, but instead the regime has thus far doubled down and had refused to admit any sort of defeat.
Irina, thank you very much. You will stay with us. We have a breaking news. The Israeli Defense Forces have now shared latest visuals from their attack on western Iran. In a statement, the IDF has stated, over the past few hours, IAF fighter jets directed by precise IDF intelligence carried out a series of strikes in western Iran on targets including underground military infrastructure used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps for storing missiles and missile launchers. Earlier today, IAF fighter jets also struck and destroyed a missile launcher intended for use against IAF aircraft. Now we go back to our discussion with Irina Zuckerman. Irina, thank you for staying with us. What is your take again on this situation? And now that we've seen Israel has struck back Iran from the visuals that have just come in, do you think that there is still a chance of ceasefire, and the weight that this ceasefire that was issued in Trump's Truth Social has any value or effect in this current moment?
Well, it seems like this attack has started hours earlier, before the most recent events, and as I mentioned, it wasn't simply a retaliation. Israel still needed to clean up and ensure that launch sites could not be used against new attacks. What happens next depends on whether there is any practical value to carrying on operations, whether there are any more attacks likely being planned, and whether there are any more capacity by Iran to launch these attacks. So far, Iran has not made any statements disavowing any future physical action or calling for unconditional bilateral ceasefire. On the contrary, evidence points to the fact that Iran may continue to launch these attacks at civilians. For that reason, what we're seeing is practical necessity and not just messaging, strategic messaging by Israel. And we may assume that if there are any more new attacks coming in, Israel will need to try to prevent it, and not simply respond to what has already happened.
And Irina, do you see any signs that Iraqi and Qatari leaders are pushing more than ever that U.S. should maybe broker a ceasefire, and they don't want to be used as a place for theater for Iran-U.S. conflict?
Well, Iraq has essentially sided with Iran, publicly at least. The Baghdad government would not join the hostilities directly, but its political support for Iran speaks volumes. In the meantime, inside Iraq, there was a proxy drone attack that struck one of the bases there, which in itself sends a message from Iran's allies that they too are ready to join the fray if anything goes wrong. As for Qatar, they have tried to capitalize on the situation to achieve a quick victory, and in fact, if nothing else, Trump's statements benefited them the most. Trump credited Qatar with negotiating the alleged ceasefire, which Israel says it has no knowledge of. So, for all we know, the entire stunt was a PR move to advance Doha's interest in taking credit for regional mediation.
And do you think, is there any fear in the region, especially Middle East, that state actors may pause in the non-state while the non-state actors will carry these attacks?
It's entirely possible, depending on how much Israel has degraded Iran's own capacity and how far the regime is willing to go to save face, and whether it actually has the backing of the proxy sufficient to carry on these sorts of attacks. So far, Iran has made a lot of threats. It has threatened to close down completely the Strait of Hormuz. That has yet to happen, and hopefully it will not. Perhaps Iran was bluffing with the hope of putting psychological pressure on its adversaries with the idea of economic impact from such a measure. It has also threatened physical terrorist attacks and proxy attacks, but so far none of its proxies have physically joined or assisted Iran in time of need, including by potentially encircling Israel. Hezbollah has been significantly weakened and is probably in no hurry to put itself in further danger after the devastating blow it has suffered at Israel's hands. Hamas is still entrenched in a protracted battle in Gaza, but physically unable to move out of the regional vicinity. Houthis have continued their attacks throughout this war, but they are located far away, and so they have limited effectiveness by definition. And Iraqi militias did send a signal earlier today, but they too are not particularly willing to risk themselves if Iran is not fighting back with full force, which it isn't, because it has no air defense to speak of at this point.
Thank you very much, Irina Zuckerman, for joining us and bringing your expertise as senior journalist all the way from New York. Now we have a breaking news. Israeli military issues another warning of incoming missiles from Iran. This is the fifth alert since Trump announced ceasefire, as per reports. In another attack, Israeli emergency services have said that 3 people were killed and 2 wounded in an Iranian missile strike in southern Israel. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.